What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of A Thinking Man's Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER. With me, as always, my good friend Tommy Styles. If you're joining us on the YouTube channel, please subscribe to the Muscle Media Network. Like the video, send it to a friend, leave us a comment, ring the bell so you're notified every time we post a new video. As always, this episode and this channel are brought to you by Kodiak Bodybuilding Apparel. Train hard, die strong. Thanks to Chris Cirillo for supporting us, supporting the show and the channel. You guys can check them out at KodiakBodybuildingApparel.com. The link for that will be below. Tommy, we got a code for that?
MMN, all caps.
Yep. Acronym for Muscle Media Network, short for that. All right, so we had IFBB Pro Kyrie Cooper on last week. If you guys haven't already, check that episode out. Man, I was super impressed speaking with Kyrie. I mean, I know him and I know what he's about coming into it, but hearing him again and getting to speak to him a little bit longer form just came away super impressed. Any thoughts from the last week's episode?
Oh, he has a champion mindset.
Yeah.
And you know, the things he does with his body, with his training and his habits, it all starts in the mind. And I think that gets overlooked a lot in bodybuilding. Actually, his training partner, who was mentioned on the podcast by him, Gabriel, messaged me and said it was cool to hear you guys talk about the mindset stuff, because that a lot of different podcasts kind of glaze over that. But if you truly want to take bodybuilding far, you gotta go somewhere else with your mindset that normal people aren't going.
I believe and Kyrie said this, I think he's a sports psychologist. So nobody knows about, the mindset of being great or being elite more than somebody like that. So that's pretty cool. So check that out if you guys haven't. And then today we're going to be doing listener Q&A. So we got some questions. I have one from a friend of the show, a friend of mine, our good buddy Scott. He's been asking this one for a bit, and we hadn't got to it yet. So I want to make sure that we get to it, and it's a cool one to talk through. Scott asks, what do you guys think of Jay, Phil, Levrone, Compton, many others, their style of training with shorter rests, ramping sets, and not training to quote unquote failure with much higher volumes? Can this work for most people, or are they better off training everything 0 to 2 reps from true failure and keeping volume much lower, focusing on top sets and not wasting energy on the warm-ups?
Well, I would say, since I've done both, and one grew me and one didn't, I would tend to agree that the 0 to 2 reps in reserve with warm-ups and less volume is probably a more blanket approach for the masses. Those guys, I'm not even going to say that it's genetics only of why they can train like that. It's a part of it, but we've heard stories of, Jay was a 700-pound plus squatter by 19 and actually didn't train his legs for 3 years, from 20 to 23, to catch his upper body up. So, I think what you saw of him in his prime may not have necessarily been the only thing he ever did. I think Jay may have trained more like Ronnie in his early years, and then saw the writing on the wall that he didn't need to do that, and decided to pull it back. Compton, I know we've talked to him on the podcast, but just from what I've heard of different podcasts, like, he had more strength than he exhibited, but it was about shorter rest periods and just making the muscles work. So again, there's not a right or wrong. It's your body. Try it. I've done that style. Great pumps, especially, coming out of a rebound. You're going to have a lot of intracellular volume in the muscles and feel really blown up. But in terms of adding tissue, I don't feel that worked for me in terms of putting on quantifiable tissue that I would see in my next prep. I have to train like I'm training now, with a logbook, lower volume, and just really taking my sets to failure.
I mean, even Levrone too, as another example that was listed. Like, man, he was incline and over the or behind the neck pressing 4 and 5 plates. So I think that there's a time and a place for everything. Like you said, I think there is times where that style, almost like pump style training, shorter rest periods, maybe isn't like growing you long term, but is probably the most beneficial thing for the situation. You talked about the post show rebound. I think that's an excellent example because there's been times after a show where you almost like, if you're really in shape, you still will probably feel like a little shaky and vulnerable the first 2 to 4 weeks after a show. And so to try and like dead set logbook, like drive up your loads and progressions, it's kind of a recipe for an injury. A lot of times I've felt, at least. But it's bizarre because you can get like crazy strong right away. But you're still not like super stable or in a great spot, like with your leverages. Your waist is still going to be super tight and everything. So, you start trying to set like new PRs, on an RDL or some type of squat pattern or something, like you might get hurt. Where like, almost any stimulus will do at that point. Like it's more of just about getting the fullness back into the muscle and getting back to like a healthy, like productive body fat point. I will say this, I've gotten more and more to the point, especially we've talked to so many different people on this show. We've seen so many different types of training styles and physiques that are impressive. I never say never, and I'm never going to turn my mind off to something. I'm working with Compton right now, and I took a little bit of that from him just recently, again, like kind of post show, right back into prep even. But I think that there's something to it, at least for me, with like some of these smaller, almost like pump body parts, where like my delts, chest, arms, I could see that stuff, like the shorter, almost I'm like timing rest periods. I could see me sticking with that into the off season for some movements for those body parts. But like I've put a lot of muscle on my back and a lot of muscle on my legs. And I never worry, like I did that by not worrying about my rest periods, and it's solely being about progression of performance, not necessarily just load, but like progression of performance one way or another. And the only parameter that I had for rest in between sets was just, am I ready? Do I feel like, both in terms of my breath and like mental aggression, am I ready to attack this and bring it to a new point that I never brought this set to before? So it's a good conversation, because I mean the proof is in the pudding with those guys, and it does seem like some of those guys had like this crazy round look to them. Again, could it be genetics? Could it be drugs? Could it be food? Sure, I think it's probably all of it. But I can say like I do feel like a different level of swelling, like especially like my delts and my arms, when I'm just cramming work into like a shorter time period.
Yeah, and I mean, not to, well, yeah, to bring, Jay has copped to using 12 IUs of growth hormone. So if he's admitting that, that's more than anybody on this show listening has probably used. So
Yeah,
that is a factor when we talk about 2-a-days and higher volume. Right. He was also eating 10 times a day. There's a lot of different factors that play into it other than the training style. Can you feed the machine enough throughout the day to warrant that train? I couldn't keep up with my metabolism. I could not keep shoveling food enough to handle that volume training coming out of, the rebound. I was gaining weight just because I was so peeled for so long. But once I got to that leverage point that I had hit before, that training wasn't going to benefit me going forward. It was just going to lead to a ton of fatigue. And I wouldn't be able to eat with that amount of fatigue. So everybody, you got to play what's best for your individual. Try both, work it out for yourself. in my experience coaching, people tend to work better with the progressive overload, 0 to 2 reps in reserve, not worry about rest periods so much, and really just focus on strength. Maybe as you get more and more advanced and you're nearing your max amount of muscle that you can put on your frame, then you can start to maybe add some of that in. But something that's interesting too is like Levrone, for instance, you know, he trained super heavy with low rep ranges on a lot. I mean, there was like 4 to 6 rep ranges for a lot of his presses and shrugs and all that, but he did the same amount of reps all the way up with the warm-up sets. So what I take that as is he just, those weren't stimulating reps for him, so it didn't affect him. Same thing how we warm up, we just tend to lower the reps as the warm-up sets go up or as the load goes up to conserve energy, right? Well, I think it's the same thing. Ronnie did the same thing. Ronnie did the same amount of reps, you know, just adding weight, and you do like 8 reps or 6 reps, whatever. So they're still getting to a point where they're stimulating reps that are, you know, stimulating the muscle or adding tissue, whatever, if they're in the off season. So that is, you know, the process of adding muscle is still the same no matter what path you take.
One other point too, like, you know, you were saying like it just wouldn't work for you, like with your metabolism and all this stuff. Like you, like knowing you personally, like you couldn't sleep enough to keep up with that amount of work either. Like I remember hearing a clip of Jay saying like, you know, a lot of times, especially in the off season, like if he wasn't eating or training, like he was sleeping. He'd sleep 6 or 8 hours, you know, over the course of the night. And then he might get, you know, 2 or 3 hour plus long naps. Like it was just all about like creating these anabolic responses for Jay. He didn't give a shit about anything else. Yeah.
If you watch his old school DVDs, and there was before like edits and cuts, he would eat a meal and then he would start making another meal as he was clean. Like that was like a assembly line.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think too, like, you know, with, you know, like if you're somebody that's wanting to try that or whatever, I totally agree. Like you guys, you know that, Tommy, the people listening probably know. I totally agree with like the blanket statement of progressive overload, especially like if we're coaching and like, you know, we can't possibly be in the gym or with someone 24 hours a day for 40 or 50 clients. It's just not possible. So then it's like, what type of system can you put in place to kind of assure that it's just working in the background for all these people? It has to be progressive training. Again, not necessarily just load, but progressive stimulus, progressive training. Now I don't, you know, as a caveat to that, I think you could marry the two. I think that you could do like a lot of your main movements, you know, for your main body parts. Like I was saying, I would never do that type of training for my back or my legs. But then if I'm going to do like a long back day, let's say, and then I get to the end and I'm doing rear delts, like, yeah, I might try to do 5 or 6 real working sets, all with 90 seconds or less of rest time. But the thing is, I'm going to marry the two ideas because I'm tracking all of those sets. And then next week, I'm going to beat that performance. Like whether it's, you know, this week it's 90 seconds rest in between, and then next week it's 80 or 75 seconds, or, you know, I did 6 sets of rear delt dumbbell swings with 60 pounds. Next week, I'm doing them with 65s or whatever the case is. I'm adding reps, whatever. So I think there is maybe a balance to strike if you're thoughtful with when you're using it. I wouldn't just immediately go in and start, you know, if you've always been like a progressive stimulus, progressive overload type person, I wouldn't necessarily start going, you know, 1 minute rest periods now for all of your sets or all of your movements, because your training performance is going to fall off a cliff compared to a no timed rest period training style. Now, if you just do that all the time, or like I said, you kind of marry the two, and maybe for your shoulders or your arms at the end of your workouts, you're still tracking your performance and the parameter set is that they're timed shorter rest periods, I think it could work. I mean, there's no rules, it all works. But you're never going to see me on like back day or quad day timing my rest periods.
No chance. I have 2 training partners most of those days now, and I mean, there's probably 4 to 6 minutes at least that go by between my work sets. But
man, I would be lying if I didn't say that there was leg days that I do solo that I have longer rest periods than that. If I'm doing like,
yeah, 4 to 6 was generous. I'm thinking because it's just, I mean, I'm not gonna go if I'm like still breathing and like stimmed up from the set before. It makes no sense.
or you just feel defeated from the prior, like you brought a set of fucking leg press or pendulum there. It's
Yeah.
like, I'll see you in 8 minutes. Like my brain needs to be ready to go again too.
Dude,
Like
after that high rep leg press set, I can't even like do a body weight squat for 10
no,
minutes.
no, no,
So
dude. Like a challenge set like that, like I'll see you at the next movement, dude. Like I'm done on this.
I'll say this for everyone listening. There's gonna be various points of your journey because we've both had them. I mean, we've talked about having them in the 2 years we've been putting out these podcasts. I was super into, the high volume idea in my prep. So I translated it to coming out of prep, which I
Yeah.
do think is a good idea. And I've echoed that to some of my current competitors coming out of prep. Don't jump into an off season, push pull legs. Take that time to run a bro split for 2 to 3 months. Your body's still healing from that contest prep, even with that weight going back on. Mentally, you're going to feel like you could run through a wall. Harness the beast, save it. You still are recovering. The health phase is going to come up after the rebound's over, and you're going to have to idle down and just learn to be a human again. You probably just spent 4 to 6 months running a lot of hard shit that had you, feeling like you could run through a wall anyway. So, take that 2 to 3 months, have fun with training, have really good pumps, but don't, like Joe said, don't try to set PRs. When I think about the size up project and everything I covered during my rebound, I didn't touch new weights at all. There was no new strength that I was hitting. I wasn't logbooking. I just had a mental note of where I was on some of my compounds. That is now the stance I have with the rebound is don't jump into any sort of concrete training split. Wait for your rebound to be over, go through your health phase, and maybe in that you could start an off-season split and then just slowly taper progression up to hold on to what you rebounded while you're cleaning out, getting blood work, all that. And then when your off-season cycle starts, it's like boom, now let's start putting on new tissue and starting the process. But the point of all that is like I was a super push-pull legs, low volume guy. Prep made me adjust. So I was kind of thinking like, okay, maybe I'm a volume guy now. And then here I am in November, I got back to push-pull legs and I'm absolutely in love with my logbook. Everything about it is like an instrument that I use each session. And I don't see myself switching off of it, but I can guarantee the next time I'm in a prep and I start to see some of the things that were happening the last time I prepped, I'll adjust a lot sooner than I did the last prep because you just have to remain fluid.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, I think you're going to utilize both at different
Yeah.
times. But a problem I see with a lot of people is they think that the volume route's easier, so they go that way because it's like pump style training doesn't build tissue.
Especially if it's not progressive. Like if there's
It
no,
has to
it's
stimulate.
too easy to kind of wuss out. If you're going solely by feel 24/7, it's too easy to wuss out. Because especially building new tissue is, we've talked about it a million times. Putting new human on your body is way harder of a process than prep and getting body fat off. So if you are going to go by like feel during that whole process, you are going to wuss out and take the path of least resistance more often than not. That's just the human nature of it. Like it's a very uncomfortable process bringing your body to like a substantially more muscular level. Like it's the depths of a really productive off season, for me, in my experience at least, are way more uncomfortable on a moment to moment basis of every day than like the depths of your hardest, most peeled contest prep for me.
Agreed. I'm in it right now. Everything on my body hurts, but I can pull
Yeah.
it. I can pull it together for training each day, and it's like, wow, my
It's the
elbow.
only time you feel good.
Yeah. but it's like new levels of strength, but you know, you're trying to shovel food down that you don't want to eat. Yeah, I'll
Bro,
take
just
that.
moving that new body around is
Yeah.
exhausting. Like I remember talking to you, or maybe it was on the show or off air before we recorded, but like, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but I had a long off season where I definitely put on a lot of new muscle tissue. And I remember commenting that like, I'm like, my bones hurt. Like literally, I have
Yeah.
like literal like growing pains. Like my body feels different.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that was a good one. Good conversation starter. You got one?
Yeah. One sec. Um, if rear delts are lagging, how do you program them in a push-pull leg split? So I know you messaged me directly about your rear delts, or no, I don't remember if you messaged me directly about rear delts or I told you that rear delts were lagging, but kind
I
of go
know
over
I
what you did to
kind
bring
of
up your
both.
rear delts.
Kind of both. I messaged you about them.
So how'd you go about programming them after that?
Man, I honestly, it was the same thing like when the arms were like a main priority. And then and then it was like, okay, the arms are pretty decent now. Like rear delts could come up and like kind of change your whole look to your upper body. I got to a certain point. I wouldn't suggest going right to this, but I got to a point where I was doing them basically every time I was in the gym. Um, and so, it's like that could be, and I would say this for something as like, I would put arms in this same category because they're just like a smaller, not taxing. You could get quality work in 15 or 20 minutes, and it's not gonna take away from those like bigger sessions. Like, man, I would go in and start legs with that, with rear delts, or like, if my tries needed to come up, something like that, I would go in and do that first before I started legs. Pull would be an obvious one. I would put that at the end. I'm not gonna do rear delts before all my big row pulling movements. Um, and then push, you could play with it. I would try doing them first. I would do them last. If you are finding that like you get to the end of a push session and the quality of work just sucks, or you just don't feel like being in there that long, or whatever the case is, I would try putting them first. It's not going to take away from like your pressing. um it
I
may
think it helps pressing.
it may enhance the pump, or like how your shoulders are moving when you do get to some of those bigger movements. So man, there's a million ways to do it, but I think that's just one of those things, like, again, like progressive stimulus. Like, if what you've always done for your adults has resulted in like underdeveloped adults, you're just going to need to do more. So find places where you can strategically add more.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of rear delts to start a push day, or even a side lateral. We
Same.
do that on our Wednesdays. We do dumbbell
Same.
laterals before we get into pressing, and it does not take away from pressing strength at all. So
Nope.
if anything, I really like the shoulder joint to have blood in it to get into pressing. And as you age, for everyone listening, you'll appreciate that too. Meadows always put rear delts first in his programs, and a lot of them for the shoulder days.
Not to
Um,
cut you off, but when you just mentioned like getting blood around that working joint first, the first thing that came to mind was Meadows' idea of how with quads, it would always be a hamstring curl first.
right.
And think about how many like high level bodybuilders we've heard reference that exact theory, like in terms of saving their longevity.
Yeah. But if you're looking for something to just really trash you every week, uh, dumbbell rear swings, sets of 50, just do like 1 to 2 sets after everything else on your push or your push day. In this case of this question, your rear delts will be smoked. Absolutely smoked. Dusty and I did those for years. Same thing with like cable ladder or reverse cable flies. Um, do a few sets building up to a top set and then do some holds,
Yeah.
2-second holds in the contraction. That's a great way to isolate and learn to connect, is to do, 1 to 5 count holds to really find it and then you can start repping with a little more of a tempo. But some people I noticed, they retract their scapula first and then they do the fly, if it's either in a pec deck or the cable, and that you're completely taking your rear delt out of the movement when you're doing that. You got to think about protracting the shoulder girdle forward and then opening out with your shoulders versus pulling back and then going. So sometimes it's a mobility issue and someone just needs to like cue you up to keep that scapula still. I did it in personal training numerous times for people, because a lot of people that work desk jobs end up getting locked here because they're on computers. So a lot of different things to look at. I think you can even incorporate rowing movements that directly target the rear delts. You know, anything that with a 90-degree or just shy of angle is going to smash rear delts. So one of those things where you just kind of got to like get stronger at your compounds and then really focus on bringing a different stimulus. If they're not growing with what you're doing, like you said, you know, bring it harder.
Yeah, it's something that's worth investing in, so to speak, because it is one of those things. It's almost, I don't know if this is a great way to put it, but I almost feel like it's almost like an exotic body part to have. Like you don't see tons of guys with like huge rear delts. So then when you do see somebody with some rear delts that they've put a lot of work into, it really like pops off. Like I think of like, you know, like your side, you know, like at least in bodybuilding, all your side shots, like my side shots look different this year at my delt, and it was mostly because of the work I did to rear delts. Like your side quarter turns, side chest, side tricep, they all are going to look different. And then of course it adds more depth and width to your rear shots too. So it's something that's, man, like we've seen like kind of this new aged you know, evidence-based trainers where they're talking about, you know, minimum effective volume and all this stuff where, you know, they like to say that you don't need to train your rear delts directly. And it's like, okay, but they all have small rear delts.
Yeah, that drives me up a wall when someone makes a comment about something, but they don't have. That's like me talking about legs. Like my legs are a weakness for me, so I don't talk about what builds big legs because I don't have big legs.
Yeah.
Like it's just common sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We're talking about what it takes to get peeled when you've never been peeled.
Right? Like how do you?
Crazy. Oh, I only do steps during my contest prep. Well, it looks like you only do steps.
Yeah. On that note, I wouldn't like if you told me that and you're peeled, cool. If you
Cool.
told me you ate hot dogs all prep and did no cardio, but you're peeled,
Great.
cool. I'm only looking at what you are. I don't like if you told me you did 3 hours of cardio uphill backwards. I'm like, well, that's what you had to do to get there. You're peeled. I respect. Like I only respect what I don't care what you had to do, how little or how much. This is bodybuilding, whatever it takes.
Dude, I remember watching Michael Lockett walk around an expo, stage peeled, literally eating Twizzlers
Yeah.
and drinking a fully leaded Coke. Like all these, you know, all of us, like, you know, nobodies, no muscle nobodies are walking around eating chicken and rice, 6-pack bag, gallon jug of water, like doing everything to the minute, to the gram. And this
Measuring our
motherfucker's,
salt.
dude, weighing our salt, weighing my whey protein. And this motherfucker's walking around eating Twizzlers, drinking Coke, and just ripped and full.
Feathered.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Okay, what are your considerations for using something like Anadrol to fill back up for show day? Have you ever used this for yourself or for a client? I assume it could be helpful, but if and only if somebody is truly peeled out of their mind and you know they do well with Anadrol.
I agree with the part about peeled out of your mind. It wouldn't even be a possible consideration if that's not there. I've never done it myself. I've never done it with a client, so I can't speak from experience. I've heard about it, talked
Yeah.
to people who've done it. So it's a thing, people do it. I've heard it even done with females the last few days, last 72 hours. I think yeah, you'd probably want to know what anadrol does to the individual for sure before just throwing it in. One of the things we've talked about probably a lot off air, but some on air, is don't do anything that's could make you 2% better if it could make you 10% worse. Like,
or 40% worse.
just ride the midline, man.
Yeah.
But in terms of the question, as someone who's always wanted to be fuller than I am every time I get on stage, I'm definitely curious about something like that. But again, there's a lot of, I think, estrogen response that would come with anadrol. So the dosing may matter. Again, you'd probably want to have done maybe a practice peak with it a couple weeks out to really gauge, but I can't speak on it from experience myself or a client.
I did it with one guy. I have a guy over, I don't know if he's in the Netherlands or Norway. I forget where exactly he is, but he travels and flies all over Europe to compete. And once we get him in shape, he likes to do like 5 or 6 shows a year. And he's like a legit last year he was anywhere between 255 and 262, like dug the fuck out. So we were trying some different shit. He's a nut. He loves trying different stuff. And I would have never, this is something I would never do. I would certainly never do it for myself, certainly never do it for like a client so like I hear that it definitely would be a prerequisite to be like peeled out of your mind. But then again, like we talked about, like I would want to protect that. Like you're peeled out of your mind. Like we don't need to do anything crazy. Like 2% more full is not putting 10 pounds of tissue on your frame. You need to understand that. Like there's like this mystique about being more full. And even like there's like a mystique around anadrol itself, like that down the stretch of a contest prep where like people have only talked about it but never seen it, like, and like there's like this funny mystique about it, like so for the one case that I can speak on myself, was he more full? Sure. Did it look like he was 10 pounds of muscle bigger? No, he was who he was. And like for my liking, like if he competed I think 5 times last year, it was probably 4th in terms of my favorite look. Like I like seeing him like super dug out and hard.
How did the hardness, like with what happened with the hardness as the fullness came?
Like the glutes and the hams then just kind of looked, I mean the lines are there, but then it's just like a little bit of a watery look. And like, I mean, that's again, like like we've talked about it, like the bigger you get too, like these manipulations and like just the physiology of having that much muscle, like it things come down to the minute, truly. So like we talk about pros and like everyone likes to be like, oh, this guy wasn't in shape. And it's like, man, I can show you pictures of this guy 6 hours before the show and he was the most peeled guy there. And then it just got away from them. One manipulation got away from them. So you go and add something like that, and it's like the water can swing quite a bit. Like you said, there's almost this like estrogenic response, even though when you look at it like chemically, there's not supposed to be one. There is, just in practice, it seems like. So it's just not something I would do. Simple fact, like if I have someone super peeled, which is always the target, at 14 to 9 days out, where it's like at this point you can just start repeating the same process and walk them out. Like I'm not adding something crazy. Like that's almost like adding anadrol is almost like your anti-diuretic. Like by the same token, I'm not adding diuretics if someone's ready to rock. Because it's going to pull the water and it's probably going to ruin the look. The same way by the same token, the anadrol is going to make you fuller, sure, but you have no idea really what it's going to do unless you practice it and have a really good idea. Like this would, like the only thing that comes to mind when I think of this is like fucking Nate and Andrew Barry. Like if he was going to do 4 shows in a season and, they've brought in crazy Nate peeled 3 times. And then as a 4th show, they're like, you know what? Fuck it. Like we've been together for 20 years, 20 shows. We've been together for 10 years. Like, let's try it. Like we know what this does for you in the off season, or we've done it in diets. Like, let's try it. But, for the average person that's going to go on stage in the NPC, you've worked your ass off to be ready 2 weeks out or whatever the case is, man. I just don't see it being worth it. Like your physique is what it is right now. It's not, the best way to put it is that anadrol is not going to add a year of off season that you haven't done yet.
Yeah. If you're thinking in your mind that you need to be fuller, and even another step, if you get feedback that says you need to be fuller, that judge is telling you need more muscle.
You need to be bigger.
Not telling you if you were fuller, you would have won this show. Nope. 99% of the time, it means you're just not big enough from a muscle tissue standpoint.
That's it. That's it.
It's hard to hear because it's what you need to hear.
But also it's hard to hear because it's like there's nothing you could do about that right now. Like that just means go get back to work and spend a year away from the stage.
At least.
Yeah.
Talking about it, it sounds like it could have a lot more merit for a female, like in a figure or a women's physique or even a wellness, if they're like too hard going into the show and they get docked for being that hard and striated. Maybe an anadrol could potentially, if we're talking about an estrogenic response and a fullness response and softening lines that, they don't want striated glutes and figures. So if I had a girl that was dug out, maybe if I'd practiced anadrol on her and known like, okay, these last 2 days, we're going to throw in some anadrol, not enough to run crazy side effects or anything, but literally just to, soften you and fill you at the same time based off the criteria of the division. That's something I could see more than what we're talking about here for males.
Fuck, I wouldn't have thought about it on my own, but when you say that, I almost think wellness too.
Wellness for sure. Because if you
like
got
more than bodybuilding or classic, because really like classic and bodybuilding, it's like just get as ripped as you can. Like at no point are you going to be rewarded for having softer glutes in classic or bodybuilding. You may get rewarded in classic.
Classic, I find your best bet is to almost come in a touch flat
and peeled. Yeah.
Because your legs, they really, as long as they're not like withered down, like the look that you get with high T3. I mean, you almost want those, you want those crisp, sharp lines.
Even, dude, I've even seen now, like, if it means being like peeled and feathered, a little withered down is not the worst, because it almost seems like they are rewarding this like slightly top heavy look, where it's like the big vacuumed front double with like a little bit lower legs, like
a wide taper.
It almost seems that way, at least on some of the physiques we've seen. I mean, you can only judge what's in front of you, but like at no point are you going to be rewarded in classic or bodybuilding for having softer glutes, whereas in wellness you absolutely may. There's been numerous examples that I have seen and can think of where it's like Tyler or whoever has been like, you know what, this X, Y, and Z was a little bit too grainy, and that's not what we're looking for. And well, Renee Jewett comes to mind. Multiple times they have told her point blank, we do not want to see your ass striated, and it is.
Yeah. No, it's so, in that context, I think there's a lot more application, or it's in that toolbox more than men.
I would still opt to probably just feed her more if I was helping somebody, but just to make the point of like where it would apply more so than like this was a bodybuilder that asked, and it's like they're after the fullness that like we've talked about just means that they need to be 12 pounds bigger.
Yeah, just get bigger. That's all it is. How do you know towards the end of prep whether you're burning fat or muscle / digging a hole?
Oh, man. This is such a cliche thing, but this comes down to, I call them like marker spots. every individual physique, if you have paid attention to your client the whole prep, there's marker spots on their body where if you start to lose them, they're flat. And then if they get to a certain point, maybe in combination of starting to look like they're losing other body parts, you might just be too far gone. Like if someone has, like let's say the most obvious one is like when a guy, their weak body part maybe is their quads. But then they brought them up in the off season. You will see throughout the prep at certain points, like when they're flat, that they all of a sudden look like they haven't improved. And then you feed them up with good food for 2 or 3 days, and then it's like, oh, in the next set of pictures, they've come back. Those like kind of volatile / weak body parts are markers of flat, full. So then if you get somebody that's like all of a sudden their legs look super withered, again, like maybe you're having to use T3 to get them in shape, or bury some like on the stairs. I feel like this is a common thing with like, I'm again just speaking in context of male bodybuilders, classic or bodybuilding. If you had to put someone on the stairs and like they started to really lose their legs, and or with T3, and then you have them do like a feed up 2-3 days of good food, still nothing, their training performance is fucking tanked, they can't get off the couch, like that's a point where I start to wonder, like, did I bring this guy too far?
Yeah, no, I think that's all.
And if I could too, like, you will start to see, again, like this is like maybe a separate thing, but like there's marker spots where like they will start to look softer, even if they're lighter, which doesn't, that shouldn't be the case. Like that doesn't make sense. So something is off. Like let's say you have someone, again, like their legs start to look a little withered, but their glutes have been in for 10 days. And then all of a sudden they're down in weight, and like you see like skin folds on their glutes that weren't there. That's like you went too far probably, because now like the muscle is so flat that it's not pushed up against the skin to show the conditioning, and it's not body fat. You didn't put body fat back on somebody. So like you start to see like loose skin or like skin folds in certain spots. Like I could think of like below the glutes on some guys, or even like depending,
Lower abs.
I was going to say, I'm pinching it as you said it, like lower abs. Like if someone, especially like if you get a guy that's 5'5" and has been really heavy or big before, that might be a spot where like that skin has expanded, and then you get them so like crazy flat that maybe they're withering away. You'd start to see like the lower ab skin fold. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think all the points you made are spot on. Monitoring strength through the prep is something I do. But I let people know there's going to be some strength loss that happens through the prep. Your leverages are literally not going to be the same. You can't expect to do off-season peak strength things, as you're 30 pounds less. So, there is going to be like a 10 to 15% deduction in strength, maybe even more. And maybe we're not even going to be measuring strength the same way we were, because we're going to pull out movements that are just not worth it at a certain point of prep, like hinge movements, squats, barbell pressing, anything like that. My client Chris comes to mind because he's so strong, because he has a powerlifting background, but he just feels like he's been hit by a truck all day outside of training. And it's my job to be like, all right, let's start pulling the barbell movements, because we don't need them. We just need to stimulate the muscle. So for him, it's about reeling him back from what he would naturally do, which is just run through the wall harder. So strength, monitoring strength. I think sometimes coaches also, they get lazy with T3. They put it in early and then leave it high or at a constant dose. And if you're starting to see some of the things that you mentioned, cut the T3 in half. Or if you're, you're giving a refeed or a high day, pull T3 on that day. You don't want to
Yeah.
speed the metabolism on that day. Pull the clen too. You know, don't just leave that T3 at 25 and just never touch it for 12 weeks. Like some people don't need that much after a certain point of like fat loss.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it will still work too. Like if you get to a certain point, and even just generally, like there, I think too, I have seen this where like if someone is truly ready, like at 2 weeks out, like you're talking 14 days out and they are dug out, they're ready to go. That the reduction of T3, if you had to use it, is like one of those tools where it's like, you would want to start to reduce output. You'd want to slowly start to work carbs up. One of those things is to back off on the T3, because deep in prep, like that's one of those things that could prevent you, even if you did everything else right as a coach and a client. It's one of those things that could maybe just bring you past the point of return. Like, point blank, there are guys that I've had on 75 micrograms of T3 before. Like, it's not ideal, but that was just what the situation called for. But in that situation, like ideally, hopefully it meant that they got ready on schedule, and that 11 days out rule, hopefully that meant that at 11 days out they're ready. At that point, like you said, pull it in half for 3 days, bring it down to fucking 37 and a half if it was at 75, monitor it for 3 days, and then maybe pull it down to 25. Like you're going to continue to get the benefits of what it is. And you're not like pulling the rug out from underneath the thyroid by going to zero, but it's one of those things where like it will help you with filling them back out and bringing them back to life if you can reduce it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our whole part of our plan that final week is reducing fatigue, and we do that by pulling the things that are probably helping drive it up: clan, T3, injectables,
Yeah.
training intensity, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Over it all. So yeah, I think another thing, because I heard Dusty mention this, the year he took it too far in terms of the look he brought in 2011, like on a seated leg curl, when you lock your legs in, the hole that he was using was 3 holes lower, meaning his legs had lost that much circumference.
Holy fuck.
So just, things like that. Pay it, like if you were fitting in a machine a certain way and, you've lost 6 inches off your roundness of your legs.
Damn, that's a wild one. That would have
Yeah.
been a mind fuck, dude. I would have like, oh man.
But he said
That, or
because
even like,
he was so into like, let's get
yeah,
sliced mentality, he didn't realize it till after.
yeah, you wouldn't. That, or like even thinking about like when you like wedge your legs under like a pull down thing,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like something like that could be a measure too. I never even thought about that. Man, that would have been such a mind fuck once you did figure it out, whenever it was. You've been like, huh, that actually meant I lost 2 inches on my legs.
Yeah. Because your mindset going is like, I'm going to be shredded. I'm going to be the most shredded
Right.
guy
At
there.
all
And like,
costs. Yeah.
you get up there and you're like, you're shredded, but you're also just flatter than flat.
You're the fucking straw man. Yeah. All right, guys. I think that was a good one. I think a pretty good wide array of questions, good conversation. Anything else? Any closing notes?
So I got, what do we got? New York Pro in what, a week and a half?
Yep. I'm gonna be there. I'm bringing
May
my lady.
18th.
May 18th. Yep. I'm bringing my
Junior
lady.
USA is the day before.
Yes. You have a client. I have a client.
I have two. I have two in junior.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Who you got? Brian?
Brian and Nick. Brian's in classic. Nick will be in open bodybuilding.
Okay. I got my buddy John, who's going to be doing open bodybuilding as well. Going to be bringing him nice and sliced into the light heavyweight category. He'll probably be right around 195, 198 range, something like that. Yeah. So that'll be big weekend bodybuilding wise. So we'll probably recap that after. Any quick thoughts or predictions for New York? Anybody you're excited to see? Exciting lineup.
I'm excited to see everybody.
I'm
Really,
excited
obviously,
to see Quinn.
Nick is who I'm really excited to see, just because
Sure.
I'm just a big fan of Nick. I like his,
Me too.
he's one of the, in terms of mental strength, I really admire he just never lets off.
He's unrelenting, man.
Nobody
Yeah.
believes in themselves more than him.
I'm besides the obvious, love Nick, Jersey guy, talk to him privately, very cool. A little bit of a name drop there, but he's that cool that he's willing to talk to guys like us. I'm really looking forward to seeing Quinn.
Yeah.
Fellow tall brother. I'm looking forward to seeing what the fuck that looks like.
He's freaky, man. He's got
Quinn looks insane, and it's been a break for him. And he like we've talked about, he played the long game. He took the time to hire the coach that's known for bringing guys in big and hard. Put in the off-season work, ate the food, undoubtedly got massive. Now he's peeled. And I think that could be like, we've seen the likes of Samson, Rami, Andrew Jacks, some of these taller physiques do really well at some of the biggest shows. And he's kind of like the heir apparent to that same. I realize I just like named all black dudes, but like they're all tall and big. And that's the point. Like they have the muscle on the super tall frame, which is just cool to see. It's a longer journey for taller bodybuilders, but once you get there, you're more imposing. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I'm looking forward to seeing Stu, because it seems like Stu's been ready and better than he was last year for 4 weeks at this point.
He's peeled. Martin's peeled.
Martin's peeled and round, man. Martin is like the roundest white dude I've ever seen, besides maybe Justin Compton, I think.
Angel Calderon is a tank of muscle.
He is. And that will be an interesting thing to see him in that lineup as an open guy.
So you got Nick, Martin, and Stu.
Stu.
I think probably all like 5'7" to 5'9", 5'8".
Tonio's not big either, like height wise.
Smaller.
Yeah.
Angel, I think, is like 5'2". Like he's a short guy.
Yeah, 212 guy.
He's got some shots that are just brutal when it comes to mass.
His conditioning's insane as well, too. Like
he's won open show before, so
you can't. Yeah, no, he belongs up there. No, he belongs up there. Yeah.
I think because I saw Martin in Detroit, both at prejudging and finals in person. If they bring the finals look, and he's obviously going to be sharper with just more time dieting and filling out, you always get better the next show. So,
yeah.
But Martin, I mean, Nick's my pick, but I expect Martin in the top 3.
Yeah, I would never bet against Nick either. But I'm hoping to see Quinn up there mixing it up with those guys. It's going to be like you said, he's going to be, man, if we've made this argument before, and I don't know that it always goes like this, but if everyone was at their best, Quinn has such a different physique that it would almost make sense like that he's either got to win or he's got to be 5th.
It's kind of what, because he looks so good by himself. I just worry not worry, but these next to these guys, he's going to not look like he has as much muscular density because he still has more muscle to add to that frame. It's just so
all these guys are dense. Like all these guys are the 5'6", super dense muscularly. So yeah, we'll see. I mean,
what's going to be on stage, like 260?
He looks insane, dude. His back is like, I remember 3 years ago feeling like he had one of the best backs in bodybuilding. And then he posted a comparison of now to then. Like, did he win the 21 Arnold?
Yes, because it was late in the year.
Yes. And so he posted a shot of how his back looked then to now. And it was like, damn, like that back is lights out, Arnold Classic champion. And how he looks now makes that back look amateur, which is a wild thing to do. So yeah, I love the whole, like, he's just been so steadfast in his self-belief, the comeback, doing it on home soil, so to speak, like, coming home to Jersey. He's coming back to a show that he won. For my money, there's other good shows and all this stuff, but like, the New York Pro, previously the Night of Champions, is still supposed to be like the most prestigious show outside of the Arnold and the Olympia. So he's coming back to make a statement and let people know, like, hey, don't forget about me, which I love that whole story. So yeah, it'll be cool. We'll wrap it up here on the Muscle Media Network, Thinking Man's podcast. For Tommy Styles, I'm Joseph Pircher. Until next time, guys, we are out.